Hey folks, I'm Joe, a professor in game AI and analytics, and I'm pretty sure that you asked yourself this question more than once. Which class deals the most damage in Baldur's Gate 3? This is a quite frequently asked question when I look at Reddit and other channels, and there's so many answers for that basically every class was mentioned there already. But what does that mean? That means that we need a proper measurement and benchmark. One way to measure this would be to have tons of data of playthroughs and calculate distributions and optimal strategies, but I'm not Larian, so I don't have that. Another would be to create your own data, so let's give that a try. Together with a friend, I built a game combat simulator fully compatible with Baldur's Gate 3, plus an interactive web front-end with manual or AI exploration, plus a complete configuration of the classes, spells and actions of Baldur's Gate 3. That means that I can fool around and tell the system, hey optimizer, pretend you're a level 6 open hand monk and want to do most damage on a single target. How do I do that? So what I get is a game state, which means the current state of actions, bonus actions, key, available skills or spells, and then I can choose to execute some of these or autocomplete. Every attack or spell in Baldur's Gate 3 is of course probabilistic due to the nature of the dice rolls, but for benchmarking we want to have a deterministic reproducible number. This means that the damage range, together with all stats and modifiers of the player and the enemy build, calculate expected damage, hit rate or miss rate, and extra effects, which could be for Flurry of Blows Topple, extra damage from Tavern Brawler, expected crit chance, miss chance, damage from the second hit, or riders. Once executed, it has the chance to apply prone, which gives advantage, therefore changing the hit rate of all of my attacks afterwards. The graph on top displays the expected damage and all the damage riders as stacked bars, summing up to the total damage per round, and then having a line chart that averages the damage per round in total. So in this case, this will be high at start and drop down a bit as soon as the buff or key are running out. And if I do this, assuming we have combat over 10 rounds and a target with comparable armor class and saving throws, we can basically observe how damage unfolds for different classes, which looks a bit like this. Yes, this is confusing for now, but bear with me, I will get to that. Before we start, we still have to agree on a condition. Because the game is not only a single enemy, not happening on the same level, with the same equipment and so on. So this first benchmark will be following these conditions. We have a single enemy with infinite health points. It has 10 armor class and plus minus 0 to saving throws on all stats. There's 10 rounds of combat. We only accept monoclasses here, no multiclassing. We only have starting equipment. We look at level 12, or actually I'll do each level later. We adhere to the tactician rule set, and we are focusing on single player situations, so no companions that could help with buffs or debuffs. So yes, there are tons of items that can tip the balance between classes. Yes, some classes need good weapons and armor more than others. Yes, the highest damage builds are probably multiclassed, and yes, damage times and resistances are not equally distributed among enemies. So this all influences this in real conditions. But we have to start somewhere on a basic ground, and I will successively add more benchmarks for multi-classes, best equipped builds and more in the future. In case you don't want to look through detailed videos of every class progression from level 1 to 12, I'm now already showing every class on level 12 with the, for the time frame of 10 rounds, most optimal rotation or skill priority. In this scenario of only start weapons and no external buffs or debuffs, martials like the Thief, Berserker, Champion or Bladelock are scoring rather low. Monk and Ranger are not as dependent on equipment as others, and the classes on top can either generate their own vulnerability, which is astronomically strong in this game, and or benefit from self-buffs like haste. The winner in this benchmark is the Circle of the Moon Druid, A, because it's pretty agnostic to any equipment, and B, because it's one of the most versatile and complex classes in the game, which I will go into detail later, even though it often feels like just bashing around regular attacks as some kind of animal. So let's start with Rogue. You already have seen why, but spoiler ahead, I will come back later to Rogue and show that it definitely has its niche. What should I say? I allowed him to dual wield its start weapon, since otherwise the bonus action on Thief would be pretty useless combat wise. Assassin might have a stronger burst in the first round, but it's only that, so Thief is better in the long run. At least if you don't stealth kill or disengage from combat and enter it again, which we won't do here. And let's not talk about Arcane Trickster. Sadly, Thief does not even get a fighting style or extra attack, so the only thing that you can do is sneak attack each turn, if possible, and rather weak offhand hits. It's a class that wants to be multi-classed at all cost, and the only benefit from not doing so is out of combat perks, especially pickpocketing from level 10 on. Level 3 is of course a nice boost for both the sneak attack and now backhand attacks. It is still very competitive with other low level classes for now, but that's it. From level 4 it would work better with dual hand crossbows and sharpshooter now, but I kind of wanted to stick with the start weapons, and in the minds of most, a dual wield melee thief is just the classic. So we only take +1 dex from ASI here. Level 5 brings proficiency bonus and improved sneak attack. Level 7 brings another sneak attack boost, 8 a bit more dex, 9 sneak attack again, 10 savage attacker, and 11 a final sneak attack. Sneak attack used to be a DRS if done on reaction, which helped this class to stay a bit competitive, but these have mostly vanished. Let's rage on. Well, actually at level 1, dipping in fire is still a bigger damage increase than raging, even though you want the defensive benefits from rage, probably. On level 2, reckless attack adds advantage for you and your opponent, so it's a double-edged sword, but very nice to secure your hits. As soon as you get your Frenzy on Berserker level 3, this is better than dipping, since it will open up frenzied attacks on bonus actions. There is Frenzied Strike, which is a nice full attack, but it also adds a stack of Frenzied Strain every time, which drags down your attack roll accuracy. Luckily, you have always advantage, so this is a bit compensated and still stronger than throwing. Level 4 might change things, since you have the tough choice between Great Weapon Master, which is decent with permanent advantage, but will get dragged down by strain a lot over time, and on the other hand, you would have Tavern Brawler, which is +1 strength flat to all damage and attack rolls, and really boosts your enraged throw. Over the course of 10 rounds it is perfectly balanced. Great Weapon Master starts stronger and falls back, where Tavern Brawler is constant and they end up on almost the same number. On level 5, extra attack, as expected, hits nice and hard. On 6 and 7, nothing really happens, but on 8, you can finally get the Tavern Brawler on top in case you still want to throw at some point. Level 9 adds a lot of passives with brutal critical, frenzy damage increase and proficiency bonus, which is a nice little damage topping, but that's pretty much everything until the very end. You can get a savage attacker or another ability improvement at 12, but the difference is abysmal. Fighter. I chose Champion. Before you tell me that Battlemaster is probably better, it probably is, yes. I just wanted to put the most vanilla class here as well, and there's nothing simpler than a Champion. You can add D8s or D10s to your attacks as a Battlemaster a few times, which makes your burst higher and you might get someone prone, but on the long run, if you hit over 30 times in 10 rounds, it doesn't make much of a difference. I will add that other subclass later as well, but for now, enjoy the wonderful progression of hitting, hitting more, and hitting even more often. If you want to make it a little bit more spicy, you can add 2 or 3 spells to your main attack simulator and call it a Pact of the Blade Warlock. On level 1, funnily enough, even normal attacks with your starting dagger do more damage than Eldritch Blast on level 1, as you can hex and dip them. That changes on level 2 and Agonizing Blast, but only on level 2. Hex triggers on every attack roll hit, which makes Scorching Ray on level 3 a nice powerful spell for the start, even though we will never really have the spell slots, but we can get a Pact weapon now. In theory, you can bind any weapon, but since this core benchmark should be done on comparable weapons, I'll use one of the summonable weapons here, the best one probably being the Greatsword, but anything makes more sense than the unusable starting dagger. You can still use Eldritch Blast for range attacks, but even with Agonizing Blast, it is outperformed by melee hits, at least as long as you don't wear Alfira's robe. I have to admit that Cloud of Daggers is ahead of Dax, but more unrealistic to maintain for 10 rounds. One step and your opponents are out. Another thing to look at would be Hold Person versus Hex. Hold Person obviously only works in humans and wastes a whole turn to set up, but makes up for that with only crits if we assume that this can be held upright. In the end, it is however only 25% stronger, whereas Hex is a really safe bet with great one-turn burst. Level 4 brings Great Weapon Master, which is only a tiny bit ahead of ASI, but you should still take it for the eventual bonus action, and it only gets better with any advantage. Even with Fireball in level 5, Scorching Ray is stronger on single targets, especially with Hex. After that, enjoy your extra attack. After a long break, on level 10, Eldritch Blast gets another update, but even though it triggers Hex 3 times, it does not reach melee hits thanks to Great Weapon Master. On 11, we not only get another spell slot, which can be scorched away, but also a little mummy by our side. Its damage is not too bad, it can also try to frighten and multi-attack, but that is only worthwhile if you have multiple. Warlock is one of the very rare classes to get something beyond a feat on level 12. We get Life Drinker. Usually Bladelock is used for multiclassing, which is way stronger, but if you focus just on this class, it is actually a nice addition. Again, if you want to have a look at hold person or monster, it adds about 20% damage, but it has to ramp up for 4 rounds and could break at any time. If we would assume unrealistically that targets don't move out, Cloud of Daggers would outperform Hex as a concentration spell from round 2 on already, but Hex is more bursty and of course way more reliable. One of the allegedly overpowered builds is found in the Open Hand Monk, but is it? Let's find out. At start, it is actually better to still wield your quarterstaff, as your main attacks will be stronger than unarmed attacks. On level 3 you get Flurry of Blows Topple, which is a direct upgrade to Flurry since it can create advantage for your next attacks. Also, your unarmed weapon bonus goes up to a d6, which is still worse than the quarterstaff. With level 4, things are getting different with the introduction of Tavern Brawler. With 1 extra strength and the doubled bonus to attack and damage rolls, it is more than 2 times stronger than before. If that is not enough, on level 5 comes the extra attack. You also get 1 to your proficiency bonus, but don't get anything on normal AC enemies, because Tavern Brawler lets you hit quite accurately already, especially with the prone from Flurry of Blows Topple. Even if the progression was already steep until now, level 6 is the breakthrough. Manifestation of Body, or the other toggles, add your wisdom to every hit, and Wholeness of Body makes sure you can deal out a lot of flurries. That makes a good 100 expected damage in round 2 and 3 already, which is almost unparalleled at this level stage. ASI on level 8 brings you to 20 strength, which is another decent 10% more damage per round. But level 9 actually gets you something again. Unarmed damage goes up to a d8, and you can substitute your main attack by Key Resonation, which lets you turn 1 key into 3 damage once per round. Mind that it's not worth to use it as a bonus action though, since Flurry will always be better against single targets. At this point, you don't have enough key to enjoy both flurries and key blast for 10 rounds though, so if you stop blasting after round 4, you will have 70 damage more in the end. That is also the only insignificant thing that changes with level 10 and 11 then, as you can blast a little longer. Level 12 lets you not only blast all the way through, but you can also use your ASI for Wisdom, which increases your frequent manifestation damage riders. Ranger. To be honest, I would have thought that the Hunter is the main damage subclass of the Ranger, since Colossus Slayer used to be a DRS, so it also triggered your damage riders like Hunter's Mark. Now it is not anymore, and its 1d8 every round will become insignificant very quickly. Gloomstalker is nice for stealth skills and if you can go in and out of combat, but this is not what we are looking for. In quote-unquote honorable combats, it only gets 1 free Dread Ambusher in the first round, and that's almost it. Beastmaster, however, starts with a full weapon strength companion attack right away that only gets better later. Hunter will get a few defensive perks and a really good AoE at level 11 though. So let's have a look at level 3. You get Bear, which is a solid companion, but only gets strong late. You get Wolf, which is right now the strongest, as its main attack is stronger than Bear, it can generate advantage for the Ranger, and it passively gets advantage if friends are nearby. In case you wonder, just go for a bite as long as the wolf already has advantage, but try to make the target prone otherwise. In case you wonder, just go for bite as long as the wolf already has advantage, but try to make the target prone otherwise. Boar is just a slightly weaker version of wolf at this point, since it can also generate advantage through prone, but lacks with damage potential afterwards. Raven is on par with wolf, it cannot prone but blind, which also gives you advantage. It is more fragile but also more mobile though, but these are practical considerations. On level 4, the prone advantage from wolf is just perfect to allow the ranger to hit well with sharpshooter. On level 5, wolf gets a necrotic damage skill, which is not necessarily good for a lot of enemies in Act 2 that have resistance, But for now, it doesn't matter. There's big proficiency bonus and damage potential from Companion's Bond as well, even though against this dummy target we're almost capping already with advantage, so Wolf doesn't get too much on attack rolls here. But since the Ranger gets extra attack as well here, getting that advantage gets even more important. However, this advantage can also come from Boar, which gets +2 strength and the maybe best rage in the game, since it comes with a free extra 1d4 damage rider through Enlarge, and even a Berserker-like Frenzied Strike without Strain. It doesn't cost a charge and it holds full 10 rounds. Boar will be best in slot for quite a while. Bear gets only a disarming attack and thus falls behind about 20% after Wolf, and Raven gets Bad Omen, which depends on strength and does not do anything beyond granting advantage, which Blind can already do. At least Beak attack gets increased by a 1d4, which doesn't help too much though. After a long break of progression, Bear gets a fat strength boost with level 11, and the Bestial Fury extra attack lets it also apply Disarmed and Prone for advantage in the same turn now ideally. This brings it onto the same level as Wolf again, even though Wolf gets a nice force damage front AoE. They would be quite even then, but Bear also gets a little sidekick that brings the difference now. Fun fact, the sidekick does not get unsummoned when you swap the companion. Boar only gets 4 con and is slow, which are adding nothing to its offensive, but the frenzied attack alone leaves it best in slot except for the first round. For whatever reason, Raven gets 2 wisdom and charisma. You also get 2 AI Ravens at level 3. They're not affected by Companion's Bond, but trigger Hunter's Mark, so can still bring you up to almost 100 damage in the first round. That makes you in theory as good as Boar, but less reliable and way more fragile. And now we got our underdog shining, while Wolf Spider, which I kind of neglected, has been more of a debuffer for most of the game. The Bursting Brood attack finally makes her shine. Unfortunately, the game handles it as a strength skill, while the spider is a dex summon, so landing it is a bit harder, but if it's necessary you can always throw a giant potion on her. Now the thing that makes Bursting Brood good is not the base power, nor the 1d4 necrotic or piercing damage, but the fact that all of these ticks trigger both Companion's Bond as well as Hunter's Mark. Then she can also apply advantage through Enwebbed, although this is a bit more cheesy than the prone or blind options of the other companions, as it's a spell and not an attack that would trigger Bestial Fury. On the long run, Spider can compete with her peers and still has some nice debuffs handy, but the damage needs way longer to unfold. Sorcerer. I picked the Storm Sorcerer here as, judging from only start equipment and a single class, it has the nice opportunity to create and abuse lightning vulnerability. Draconic is also strong, especially with augmented Scorching Rays, but we leave that for another day. On level 1, Sorcerer starts out very straightforward, but will get more complex in the end. The best you can do is to rely on your hardest hitting Chromatic Orb, Thunder, and add some cantrips. At 2 we get Sorcery points, which add the whole spirit to Sorcerer. Since we are looking at single target damage right now, we can create another level 1 spell slot, otherwise Twinning your Orb is best. Level 3 gives us Quickened Spell, which is probably the best perk to this class, at least when it comes to burst damage. This way you can increase your first round burst to 2.5 the damage from the previous level, or convert it to a spell slot again and break even from round 6 onwards. Since this benchmark is most interested in optimizing damage over 10 turns, we go with that. Level 4 gives us 1 Charisma on top of the spell slot and sorcery points increase, in case you wonder if it makes more sense to create 1 level 2 spell slot or 2 level 1 slots now. It makes no difference over 10 turns, yet your burst will be slightly higher with the level 2 slot. Level 5 gets us Haste. But is it worth more than a concentration spell that does continuous damage? Cloud of Daggers would be more beneficial from round 5 on, but keep in mind that all of it would have to hit. Until now, nothing looked really stormy about this Storm Sorcerer, but finally this is going to end with level 6. We now do extra damage with every lightning or thunder spell, get core lightning, and most importantly, can create wet at will. In-game you probably will have companions create this for you, but this is a single player benchmark and we will look if it's worth to spend the spell slot and action. If we look at the first level burst, we already see a 50 damage quickened lightning bolt when wet. I swapped from COD to haste now to squeeze in as much as we can into the time window of wet. This of course depletes your spell slots faster, but you will have a really nice burst. Save the remaining level 1 spell slots for further wet applications, and you can still do decent damage with Shocking Grasp or Ray of Frost cantrips. Delaying your burst doesn't really get you anything. Another option for your concentration would be to forget haste, but end with Call Lightning as your last level 3 slot. This can be recasted again and again, but is only half the power of Lightning Bolt at this time, and you lose every third round to only create water, so this is far behind at this time. From level 7 on, we will only get stronger with more powerful spell slots, sorcery points and ability improvements, so you will have a nice and steady progression. As it goes on, you can experiment with what kind of spell slots you want to create, or just increase your initial burst. In practice, this will depend on the fights that you will face, of course. Level 10 also improves your cantrips to a point where they are on par with level 2 spells, thus feel free to convert these slots into sorcery points and then higher level spells. Level 11 brings Chain Lightning, a tad stronger than upcasted Lightning Bolt, but really strong if you can twin it. Oh wait, that was patched out. On level 12, just for reference, I compare 3 different rotations here again. Converting level 2 slots and sorcery points to high level spells with haste and wet, bursting away from round 1 with everything we have, with the good amount of spell slots and sorcery points in the endgame, this finally becomes viable, or converting almost everything to sorcery points, start to burst with quickened level 5 spells into wet, and finish with a level 6 Call Lightning that gets recasted every turn twice. Since we can quicken every round, we kind of simulate haste without the danger of lethargic, but can maintain decent damage over 10 rounds. Another contester for the "this class is so overpowered" title is Paladin. To be fair, it is very strong and it can burst very reliably, but we are only in the middle of the video yet. On level 1 we start fairly easy. Dip and Inquisitor's Might for damage riders, Backbreaker can create advantage, but is it worth it? Not really. On level 2, should we stack all 3 damage riders and unleash a Divine Smite with them? No, at this point Searing Smite is better for the consistent damage. On level 3, Paladin already develops a bonus action syndrome. But what is the priority? Vow of Enmity, Dip, Hunter's Mark, Divine Favor, or just use them for the smite effects? I looked at all the alternatives and advantage from VOE from the start on is just the best. That becomes even more elevated with the feat on level 4, where we can exploit Great Weapon Master again. Divine Favor is just not worth the spell slots here, just use it for a Divine Smite. As with other martials, Paladin really benefits from level 5. There's extra attack, proficiency bonus increase, and there's now 6 spell slots to sink into smiting now. Branding Smite is not a DPS increase over Divine Smite, and only good if you need to smite ranged or don't have Volos Ersatzei. After that, prepare for a long break. Except for some spell slot upgrades or +1 strength at level 8, nothing really happens. That changes on level 9 of course, since you're one of the few attackers that can haste themselves. You will burn out your spell slots pretty quickly now, but this creates an almost unparalleled burst. While level 10 is also just to hang in there, 11 gets really nice with a free smite-like radiant hit on everything, and another level 3 spell slot. Last but not least, should we pick Savage Attacker or get to 20 strength with ASI, due to the large number of hits that benefit from Savage Attacker but not from strength, it is actually about 3% better.
Ye gods! Can it be? How terribly compelling!
Swordsbard. As with the Rogue, I allowed him to carry an offhand hand crossbow as well, since it only gets the 2 weapon fighting, which really suggests that. On level 1, Dissonant Whispers is the only worthy spell and only marginally better for damage. Use it for control if you want. As soon as you get Slashing Flourish on level 3, this class gets really good. Sure, your Bardic Inspiration is quickly depleted, but at least it's back during short rests, and if it's out you can still upcast your Dissonant Whispers. On 4, Sharpshooter is a must pick here, since you can shoot more often than any other ranged class right now, which you really want to boost. Since it drags down your accuracy, it could be beneficial to cast Fairy Fire now for your advantage. It will delay your burst for 1 round, but will do over 40% more damage in the long run. Forget about Dissonant Whispers already, your Sharpshooter ranged attacks are way better now. Level 5 is not so impactful as for other classes, but at least you get Bardic Inspiration more, and their damage is increased by 2, which helps you with damage in the later part of the fight. Glyph of Warding is also a better spell than range attacks at this point. Level 6 brings us of course what we all waited for, extra attack to be able to shoot up to 5 arrows per round and stack all the damage riders on top. This is huge and squeezes your burst into only a few rounds. Over 10 turns you will not notice a drastic increase, but until turn 4 or 5 it really escalates. This is also the point where just attacking is doing more damage than your spells now, at least on a single target. Glyph of Warding is still great to hit multiple enemies. Level 8 brings us +1 dex and another bardic inspiration, which are nice to extend our flourish burst, plus an additional spell slot. Level 9 lets us hit even better with the proficiency bonus, and we can upcast to 5 in our late rotation. Level 10. Now we got a big breakpoint with magical secrets. So many spells, but which ones to pick? An evergreen is probably haste, but then there's also Conjure Elemental for free damage, and the unique Banishing Smite that no one else can get. So we'll focus on these 3. When we do haste, it locks us out of Fairy Fire as an advantage generator, but it also lets us start in turn 1 again as long as we don't want to use Banishing Smite as well, which is a concentration spell. It can be safely interrupted though and followed up with haste in the second turn if we want that. Then we get 9 arrows out in turn 3, which is just insane. Of course, this only lasts as long as we have Bardic Inspiration, which are then depleted already, but luckily main hand attacks are strong enough now. In case you wonder if Banishing Smite is really worth delaying haste, yes, except for turn 2. Now, if we don't want to lose Fairy Fire, we can bring the strong Water Elemental that generates its own vulnerability and still have 1 Banishing Smite cast. Having no haste, the damage unfolds slower, but the free cold vulnerability really shines in the later parts where you can maintain high damage per round. Okay, but we don't really need the Banishing Smite. Give me the Elemental and haste. Of course, this is behind in turn 1, since you don't have the strong smite, but already in turn 2 you will be past 250 damage. Now the Elemental is not only a nice sidekick gimmick, but it also allows your Glyph of Warding Cold to hit really hard, which makes level 3 or higher spell slots better than your ranged attacks again. This hybrid cold magic ranged swordsword is the strongest alternative among them. On level 11 we have not a lot to add except for a level 6 spell slot. If you're less into a hybrid bard but more into the machine gun ranged attacker, the Air Myrmidon might be of interest now since it can stun on a regular attack, which gives you advantage on the target. The multi-attack on Water Elemental and Bard's access to cold spells though makes it still ahead. Last but not least, on level 12, the missing dex gives a final little push. Cleric. There's so many domains and I chose the Tempest. Why? Well, you have to wait for that. On level 1, there's nothing big to see here, only that Cleric starts with 2 very strong skills already and that main hand attack is better than Produce Flame and Sacred Flame. You get a tiny expected damage increase if you use Guided Bolts and an advantage on your Inflict Wounds instead of just using 2 Inflict Wounds. On level 2, Destructive Wrath is of course the main toy of this class, but it doesn't help us at this stage, as we don't have a good way of making use of it. Chromatic Orb would be a real head start here, but for this we would have to multiclass. On level 3, on a single target damage basis, Shatter is not better than an upcaster Thunder Wave, but what we also get is the Spiritual Weapon, which gives us basically a free extra attack early on and is worth the level 2 spell slots right away. On level 4, we get just a small increase due to the ASI feat and more spell slots. Now on 5 there is Spirit Guardians, one of the best skills in the game, and we can pair it with the Spiritual Weapon for 2 sources of sustained damage. Glyph of Warding also gives us a better slot to use our Destructive Ward with. Or is it better to summon a Skeleton for even more sustained damage? Sadly yes, I have to say, but Glyph of Warding is still good for engaging as it does not waste your action and is a huge AoE. But we are still Tempest domain. So let's try something lightning-y for once. We have Create Water that might be of use, can still bring the skeleton, and have a cheap recast on Call Lightning pimped with Destructive Ward and Wet. It needs 1 round for the water, which lets you have a big burst in round 2. But then, regardless if you ignore Wet or waste every 3rd round's action to cast it, it is still a bit inferior to Spirit Guardians. You can of course also use Spirit Guardians and Wet and pump your level 3 slot into a massive Glyph of Warding Lightning, but then you don't have any spells to make use of Wet anymore, so this is the weakest option. On level 6 we have finally enough spell slots to actually cast a spell benefiting from Destructive Wrath. On level 9 we get Insect Plague, but upcasted Spirit Guardians are still stronger if you can do melee. Destructive Wave is a nice big number, but not stronger than an upcasted Glyph if either Destructive Ward or Wet is available. At level 9 we finally have enough spell slots to do a second round of Wet Lightning combo, which gives us the needed damage increase to make lightning damage here worthwhile. On 10 we get Divine Inspiration. Is it overpowered? No. You can use it if nothing else is available, but it's a once per game, so I'd rather go for the nice legendary mace then. At 11 it is time for an epic summon. We get the choice between Cambion, Deva, Ancient Servant and Genie, in this order of damage efficiency on their own. Cambion and Deva don't matter too much, though Radiant is way less often resisted than Fire, especially if we still want to use our Wet for lightning damage increase. But is it worth the level 6 spell slot with high sustained damage skills like Blade Barrier or upcasted Insect Plague? Well, for once it is quite unrealistic that they can hit 10 turns in a row, and even then, since you can precast Deva before the battle, you don't lose an important action in the first round, and level 5 Spirit Guardians is way enough as a concentration spell. I added a Spell Sniper on level 12 here, but your best spells on vanilla Tempest domain are no attack rolls, so feel free to grab anything else that you like. Wizard, and while there are many schools, Evocation is of course the evergreen. On level 1 we get Chromatic Orb Thunder, which will be our best damage spell in a while. After that is depleted, we can cast a lot of colorful cantrips, but even though Poison Spray has the highest dice, Firebolt will most often be the best one, because the attack roll is more reliable than a con save that negates on miss. But there are so many other spells, and an old question would be, is it worth casting Witch Bolt? And I have to say, from round 10 on, it breaks even, so in most cases Chromatic Orb Thunder is your friend, if the enemy isn't wet. But on level 3 the unpopular Flaming Sphere, given that it does not die, will become valuable from round 3 on. But if we are at that point, we can also go for Cloud of Daggers. With level 5, now we get Haste, but is it worth it? Let's try out and ignore the all too popular Fireball, because Scorching Ray is better on a single target anyway. Compared to just casting away, yes, it's of course better. Compared to Cloud of Daggers, given that it can hit, no. At this point you should precast and animate that skeleton, get the spell slot back with Arcane Recovery and rely on your Cloud of Daggers. On 6, Potent Cantrip is really a niche, but gives Poison Spray a little tiny edge over Firebolt, but level 7 increases the Decent Skeleton to an army of 3. And that not enough, it gives us Conjure Minor Elemental. But which are any good? Mud has a bit stronger auto attack, Aether has a nice dot, but not worth it, and Methods can even burst in the end for a nice damage finish. I would advise for the Ice Methods, which can already give you and your squad advantage by knocking over with Frosty Balls, but will be even stronger very soon. Level 8 gives us a small increase with +1 int and more spell slots, but level 9 introduces a game changer again. Conjure Water Elemental brings us the chilled condition without a big investment, which doubles all of our cold damage. That means we finally accept that haste is given to us and set our clocks to Ice Age. The combination of cold vulnerability, prone for advantage, and hard-hitting spells such as Cone of Cold or Chromatic Orb Cold now lets us forget that we ever used any fire magic, but start at a 140 damage burst turn 1. This sounded a lot, but the multi-attack from Water Elemental is even almost better, as it gets its bludgeoning damage doubled and cold damage even quadrupled on chilled targets, which should be easy to hit if prone from our methods. This way every other round can hit way over 150 damage, and this is not even the end. Level 10 is the upgrade that every evocation wizard was looking for initially, but empowered evocation is not even that important to us anymore. Even the improved Ray of Frost is nicer at this point. You can of course compare this build to a build that makes use of empowered evocation, like looking at Magic Missile or Scorching Ray, but with this setup this one will be better. Level 11 brings us a level 6 spell. Looking at an upgrade to the Conjured Elemental, Myrmidon is not a lot better than Water Elemental. The triple explosive Icicle is about 4 damage stronger than multi-attack Cold on this setup, but we can do better things with a level 6 spell slot. Disintegrate is a no-brainer, but not the best in this build. Neither is just upcasting any damage skill. Actually, our strongest ice skill now is Wall of Ice. Usually it's a concentration spell, but you can summon and break the concentration to do double damage instantly. While this is a strong first round burst, we can also go for the Ancient Servant, which makes up for it in 3 to 4 rounds. Yes, that means we have pretty much maximized our summon army, but this build even shines without. Just bring an elemental or myrmidon for the cold vulnerability. On level 12, Spell Sniper again adds a small improvement to this already overwhelming damage. Just to put this fridge build in context to the off-the-shelf Evocation Scorcher, you get way more out of empowered Evocation with Scorching Rays, but if you don't have a way to make your enemies vulnerable to fire damage, you lose a third of your potential damage. Finally, Druid. On level 1 you get Create Water from the start, which, as we already know, is a powerful debuff to double your lightning and cold damage. But is it worth to cast it already? Not yet. On level 1 it's a waste of an action, since it can't be really exploited and weakens dipped in fire. So just get some Ive Knights flying and club around with your Shillelagh. Now we pick Circle of Moons, since it's so strong and very different from all the other classes. But which transform is the best? At this point, Wolf, of course. It gets permanent advantage as long as you have friends nearby and can guarantee critical hits frequently, which is quite unique. You get the most damage out of this if you alternate between Exposing Bite and, if that hit, Normal Bite. Bear is more robust but not outstanding damage-wise. Badger can knock enemies prone, but it costs a full action, so you're better off with just attacking, which is comparably weak though. Spider can create her own advantage with Enwept, but is rather weak, so that it falls behind Bear even. For good measure, I also compare Halsin's Cave Bear transform here. Halsin has a bit of an advantage due to higher strength and the bursty one-time multi-attack, but unfortunately all other transformations get stronger at level 4, and you don't really meet Halsin at level 1. Oh, and the cat is a cat. Meow. On level 3 you could spend your level 2 slots into upcasted Ice Knives to increase your damage per round by about 10%, but with the next level that will be obsolete already, so rather save them for some heals. As I said, the upgraded level 4 Wolf easily bites Halsin's Cave Bear away, especially if we choose Tavern Brawler. Just to acknowledge the new other two transformations, the Raven is also not very offensive, and it's not worth to blind for damage alone, only for debuffs. For the Rothi, however, it makes sense to make enemies prone and use the advantage on gore. Still, not as strong as an exposed advantage Wolf Bite. On level 5 we get Wild Strike, which gives us an extra attack, which kind of doubles our damage output. Nice. Level 6, Panther sounds promising with the interaction between Pound and Jugular Strike, but Pounce already has to land, and even then, the regular bite action does the same 4 to 22 damage than the special condition Jugular Strike. So it's worth to make it prone for the advantage, but Jugular Strike doesn't stand out. And guess who still has advantage? Of course, the Wolf, which is even stronger without advantage, even without the exposing bite. So the only benefit is the invisibility, which is good for engaging, but even with the advantage and extra damage, it is only half a damage point bigger than Wolf in the first round. But we also get the Owlbear here, which finally can outperform Wolf due to its bonus attack and Enrage. Spoiler, we are not doing any enlarge or weight increase shenanigans here from large height. That has been shown to produce insane damage numbers, and it's not really interesting for our general gameplay. Question is only, should you enrage or save your bonus action for the very strong crushing flight that makes even prone an advantage? There might be a little edge of enrage, but keep in mind that it ends once the 12 HP are gone, so if it can't be sustained over all 3 rounds, it is not worth it. On level 7 we get finally something to put our spell slots in. There's a Woodland Druid which, if we would still be on Wolf, benefits highly from the Exposing Bite guaranteed crit on her mighty Stringent Shillelagh strike. However, I ran the numbers and the Owlbear is just so strong that it outperforms this interaction. Your 2 new friends contribute about plus 50% extra to your damage output, so don't underestimate that. On 8, Sabertooth Tiger gets the prone directly on its bite, so it's a direct upgrade to Panther, but no match to Owlbear, sorry. What you also get is another level 4 spell slot, which adds some ice hurling methods for free basically, even more that can generate prone. On level 9, more friends? Yes, we get even more friends. Level 5 spell slots enable full elementals, from which the water elemental is, again, still the best because of its chill synergy. You chill slam, get prone with methods, and go mad with Owlbear and friends. This is closest to being in a tribe that I ever felt. When you thought this is already strong, it only gets better. Level 10 brings us the improved Wild Strike and so many more transformations. Let's look at that in detail. There's the Dino with Corrosive Spit. It's nice to bring AC down, but damage-wise only breaks even after 10 rounds, since it does not trigger Wild Strike. Otherwise it's quite comparable to Owlbear if you ignore the Enrage. But the actually interesting shapes are obviously the Myrmidons. Air Myrmidon has the same story as Dino, with its Raging Vortex. Earth is the only Myrmidon still benefiting from Tavern Brawler and can surpass Dino and Air with its bonus action attack. Then we have the Fire Myrmidon, where the appeal is of course in the self-haste, but it only lasts 3 rounds, and only if you're not losing concentration in the time. Given all of that risk, it barely competes with the Earth Elemental on its haste turns, and the burn also doesn't cut it if you don't bring a Fire Elemental with you. The benefit of the Water Myrmidon shape is that its main attack, Hyamal Strike, can apply Chilled, which again increases its own damage. That alone is yet not enough to reach the output of the Earth Myrmidon, but luckily it increases your Elemental's cold damage as well. Since we already know that the Water Elemental's multi-attack is strong, let's bring this back into the full simulation. Mind that we are first doing one Hyamal Strike for the Chilled, then Chromatic Orbs for the Prone, since these allow us to increase the damage of all following skills, including the other Hyamal Strikes. If you do it the other way around, it could cost you about 10 expected damage per round. In subsequent rounds, Earth could use its bonus attack and comes pretty close, but Water is still slightly ahead, so we have a winner here. Over 220 expected damage per round at level 10 already. Level 11 allows us to summon Myrmidons. Of course, we're going Water again, and substitute its multi-attack with Explosive Icicle, which 3 projectiles hit even harder given the cold vulnerability and prone. It's not much, but about 7% increase, and a more robust summon are not bad. At 12, animal wild shapes get a buff of 2 per attack. This however cannot compete with the cold squad anymore. I did not even mention that you can still concentrate on spells while being in wild shape, so you could cheese even more out of this with a Thorn Wall, Insect Plague or similar. But since this is the winner of this benchmark already, I just refrain. Now that we have seen them all, you probably recognize that it needed quite some time and levels for some builds to become strong. So instead of calling one build the strongest, we should look at the progression of their damage potentials over the levels. This is why I prepared this progression heat map, in which we can see that under these conditions, our little rogue is easily outperforming all else. And this is even before advantage, stealth or anything. He loses his potential with level 5, as all the marshals get their extra attacks and the casters level 3 slots, which is often a breakthrough. Who rules in this middle ground is the open hand monk, who was never a bad idea but gets a big push with manifestation and wholeness of body, and, believe it or not, the Beastmaster, who, additionally to his extra attack, just got a fat ball for birthday that can enraged, frenzied attack, create prone advantage and deal good damage thanks to Companion's Bond. Beyond that, in the later stages of the game, the cold strategies from Wizard and Druid get really aggressive. This is thanks to the almighty Water Elemental, or Myrmidon, and the better access to cold spells or attacks. From then on, marshals are no match anymore, but I agree that marshals also benefit more from not having only start weapons. So we could of course exclude the 3 cold abusers, which would rather showcase Cleric and Sorcerer, both being able to create vulnerability with Wet, Vengeance Paladin, who just brings its own haste, extra attack, permanent advantage, radiant damage riders and bursty smites. Monk is still in the game and will also benefit from having great gloves, but Ranger will probably fall back a bit, since half of its damage is caused by an animal which will not evolve with equipment. The remaining classes are not necessarily bad, but there is a reason why they rather want to be multiclassed. Alright, that's it from my first benchmark. Please let me know which conditions you would be most interested in for the next time. The rotation optimizer is publicly available if you want to play around with what would happen if you execute what skill, but multiclassing and the many equipment choices of Baldur's Gate 3 will only follow in a later update. Thanks for watching.